Hey guys, one of the problems right now that everyone's dealing with is what to do about tariffs. What's interesting about this as an issue is that the catalyst is which side of the bed an 80-year-old man wakes up on today. Not a political statement, but an 80-year-old man wakes up on the grumpy side of the bed, it seems more often than not. So what will Trump do and where will the tariffs actually land? I don't think trade will be frozen forever, which it effectively is right now. If you look at 145% tariffs, it translates through to like a pretty sizable cost increase, and I don't think it's where it's gonna land. So my 2 cents on it is that it's going to break in a positive way. Tariffs are still gonna be there in some fashion, but it's gonna be something manageable and palatable that's unlikely to cause a major recession in the United States. So how should brands navigate this? Hold off as long as possible on bringing inventory into the US while these tariffs are super high, even if that means going out of stock. Slow the rate of sales, slow the rate of promotions, and preserve your days of inventory on hand. Where should you plan for tariffs to be long-term? This is my own opinion, but there seems to be an across-the-board 10% for the rest of the world. At a minimum, they'll be 10%. I think they're much likely to be 20, 30, or possibly 40% for China. That will translate through to probably a 15% price increase on the retail price. I don't see them being any higher than that. Could they be by category? For sure. But I think it's gonna land somewhere very reasonable, and I think that it's more likely to remain there in some fashion as a negotiating tactic, but I don't think it's gonna be deal killer. I think it'll be something that gets resolved in the next 2 months and will enable you to plan and still have a great Prime Day. Tariffs are definitely gonna affect your profit margins. The degree, to what extent, TBD. But should you raise prices? Price increases, the principle is hold off on them as long as possible, because you're likely to get better clarity on just how much of an increase you need to make. If you need to take price, try to take the minimum amount that you can on price right now. 4%, 8%. I wouldn't push more than a 12% price increase on the retail price unless you absolutely have no choice. But we see a lot of knee-jerk reactions, suppliers saying if there's a 30% tariff, then there's a 30% cost increase overnight. A lot of those knee-jerk reactions, I think, are gonna end up getting walked back. And price increases are very easy to push through. They're very painful to deal with the fallout. And so hold off as long as possible before you make those price changes. And when you do make them as incremental as possible. Pass through the absolute bare minimum. Don't use this as an opportunity to mark it up an additional few points and try to make something on it. And I think if you do that, at the core of it, you want to remain as competitive as possible as a brand. You want the max amount of clarity that you can get on the tariffs. It's more of a negotiating tactic. I don't think it's more of what a long-term setup will be. Trade wars lead to real wars. We'll see where it goes, but I don't think that either side wants a major trade war or a real war. How can I mitigate the impact of tariffs on my business? Number one, roll back promotions. Number two, cut marketing spend. And number three, be really tactical in which parts of your catalog you push. If you have some tier 2 or tier 3 SKUs that don't move as fast, see if you can prioritize those, and the ones you have heavier inventory on, push those a little harder right now, even though it's less likely to be effective. But the more promotional you are, the more advertising dollars you apply towards your inventory, the faster those units are gonna move. You'll never hear me say this any other time. Right now, you want to target slow turns on inventory. Take your days of inventory in hand and stretch it as much as you possibly can. That will buy yourself time. Out of stocks are very costly. So the trick here is avoid paying high tariffs, avoid going out of stock, and if you can, slow the rate at which you're selling or promoting, even if that means that you spend a little bit less on advertising or a little less on promotions. Save your bullets for a rainy day. The inventory value that you have today, that cost is a sunk cost. You already paid for it. You already have a price structure in place. If you need to push a new cost, do it on the new units that come through. Leave your existing inventory as is if you can. The problem with duties and tariffs is that cash has to be paid for when that inventory arrives in the States. So if you need that cash flow and you anticipate that hit to cash, and you have no other choice, then you have to raise cost and raise price on your existing inventory. If you have the cash to back it and wait, my advice is to wait. But the timing of when tariffs are paid and how they're paid really can affect cash flow. So if you're importing a lot of inventory while tariffs are 145%, the duties are just absolutely horrendous and you've got no choice. If you can avoid that, avoid it at all costs. Everyone is looking at, if it's not made in China, where else is it made? The place I would look, start with Korea, start with Indonesia, start with places other than Vietnam and Cambodia. Everyone's looking at Vietnam and Cambodia as the second source for if it's not made in China, where else is it made? If you can, try nearshoring. Look at Mexico, look at South America. There's obviously some great tools to help with sourcing, and there's some great relationships. If you need some help, just comment sourcing below and we'll send you some recommendations. I love the guys over at Sourcify, and I also love Brian Haney. Both of those are excellent resources if you're looking to second source from a lower tariff country at a competitive cost. At the end of the day, this entire world relies on mostly things made in China, and that's not going to change anytime soon. And so while there will be an effort to push demand to other places, I still think it's going to be difficult to make that actually happen. And these wheels turn fairly slowly. But absolutely looking at sourcing from alternative suppliers. It's a really smart thing to do right now. Going up on Vendor Central is very painful. Going down is very easy. If you're on Vendor Central, it's a little tricky. I would push a cost increase now of 12%. Start signaling it, start negotiating it. Be careful saying it's directly related to the tariffs, because if the tariffs change, Amazon is going to want their cost to change. So position it as a cost increase, because it could take you anywhere from 1 to 3 months to get that through. If you need it to go through really fast, feel free to say it's a tariff related, but understand that if the tariffs change, Amazon will want their cost to change as well. If you have the ability to play the long game, push the price increase now, wait 2, 3, 4 months to get it through, but pushing it as a general cost increase will mean that you have the flexibility to leave it there more permanently should you desire. So if you're in Vendor Central, if you can hold off, do. I do think we're going to get some clarity on this in the next few weeks. However, if you absolutely need to push those cost increases, even if it's tariff related, when you push it, be careful saying it's tariff related on the technicalities, because if you check those boxes, Amazon will want those price increases to roll back the minute that the tariffs change. Tariffs are definitely category specific. There are categories that are impacted in an outsized fashion. It could be toys and games. It could be industrial and scientific. You have raw supplies like iron, steel, and other subcategories that have been affected in an outside fashion. Because tariffs are category specific, be very careful playing some of the gray hat tactics or some of the black hat games of categorizing your item in a different category than what it really is. Be careful benchmarking the cost way lower than what it actually is. The penalties, if they catch you, can be very excessive, and it's just frankly not worth the business risk. So be very careful doing those kinds of things, that even though there's a strong incentive to do those at this point in time, be very careful making those short-term trades, because they could come back to bite you. And Uncle Sam does not tend to be very forgiving. And if you can't afford the tariffs, you definitely can't afford the penalties. If you change your sourcing location and you change from made in China to made in Indonesia, it's absolutely going to change your shipping times. I think one of the best things you can do is order extra inventory to account for that, and highly consider air freighting some of the initial PO run. Air freight over some of the units, even though it's not as cost effective, because you're likely to encounter longer shipping times. Follow the Apple case study. Apple air freighted over 5 cargo truckloads of iPhones ahead of the tariffs to get ahead of them. There's no reason why you can't do a little bit of the same thing. Air freighting some units in at a lower margin per unit might be worth it just to stay in stock and account for a longer lead time by ocean. The ports are going to be very backed up when this all lifts. They're going to get slammed with a bunch of cargo ships that have been waiting offshore and waiting for the tariff and duty amount to change. And when that happens, it's going to take an extra few weeks for you to get your inventory. Plan ahead and air freight.